Hi, my name's Simon Leadbetter and I'm delighted to be joined by some brilliant people to talk about a new report that the people at char.gy and YouGov have produced called What Everyone Should Know About EVs. I'm delighted to be joined by Yann from char.gy, Izzy from Voodoo, Melanie from ZapMap and Kevin from KC Talks EVs. So I'm going to come to you first, Kevin. You spend a lot of time with what you do talking to ordinary drivers. What kind of myths are you coming up most often in your conversation, and how quickly do people change their minds once they see the facts for themselves?
So the first thing I want to kind of talk about is probably that they don't go far on a single charge. Now the thing is that when we go on to a single charge in particular, how far are you realistically going to drive in one go? Put it this way, I think the first thing we probably should talk about is bladder range.
Bladder anxiety.
Bladder anxiety, yes. I have now tested that bladder anxiety. And I get to about 3.5 hours before needing to stop, of which at that point I need to test whether or not leather is truly waterproof. Okay, so that's about right, I would say, probably the upper limit. And anyway, I think the highway codes state that you stop after 2 hours, 2 hours, 50.
The car alarm goes after an hour and a half
Yeah.
and says you should take a break now because driving tired is terrible. I think the average range for a typical drive, it's like under 30 miles, the average drive.
It's under 16.
There we go. So now, my bladder can survive 16 miles, but 300, I'm at a push. As a 53-year-old man, I am at a push to get over 300 miles.
Absolutely, and the thing is that is the long distance range. Now the average, I think, motorway speed, I think, has been measured to be, 51, 52 miles an hour.
Perfect for EVs.
Exactly, right? The thing is that when you look at that and you go, right, 3.5 hours at 50 miles an hour is about, 180 miles? The vast majority of new EVs on the road that you can buy today, and actually quite a lot of the used market as well, can do 180 miles, okay? Very comfortably. So that's the first single charge issue. Now let's actually go to real life, right? The average, I think, mileage between MOTs is 7,400 miles. So that is, on average, my maths is awful, but I think that's just under 150 miles a week. Now my 5-6-year-old MG ZS EV that I did buy new in 2019 has a WLTP of 163. Realistically though, in the types of driving people will do, it's going to be slightly more than that, probably, maybe 165, 170 miles. That means that an average person would have to charge once a week. Yeah. My Ioniq will do about 180 miles, once a week charge. This is a vehicle that actually was cheaper than the hybrid, cheaper than the plug-in hybrid to buy used, plus, on top of that, I think even cheaper than the equivalent Hyundai i30 petrol.
I'm conscious that we all talk to people about EVs and myths. I'm just to try and spread it out a bit in terms of, for you, what views are you coming across which are really, when you speak to a friend, you go out to a club with someone or you meet someone for dinner and they're anti-EV, like the people that Kevin talks to. What's the myth? What is the stubborn myth that's sticking with you?
I didn't have a myth. I'm a petrol head. So I've got a friend of mine that bought about 4 years ago, keeps cars for about 4 years, an Audi S3. So I loved it. It's got the performance that I love. It handles really well. I'm in love with it being, I'm a petrol head. So recently the gearbox gave way and did some small repairs to get it back in on the road again, but recognised it was probably going to start to degrade, so we needed a switch. So I said, what are you buying? You thinking about buying an electric car? He went, no, I'm a petrol head. I'm going to buy another S3. I went, okay. And you keep your car for about 4 years? He went, yeah. So what does that depreciation look like? And the reason why this is important to him is he's an IFA, so it's all about the numbers and depreciation and the money in his pocket. Independent financial advisor. And so it's all about money and what it means in the long term. So he said, well, the average depreciation, because I'm going to buy it second hand, if it's already taken a lump and then it will just gradually go down on a linear scale. And I went, yeah, but what happens if nobody's going to buy it in 4 years' time because EVs have caught on? Is it still linear? And he went, oh. 2 days later, he told me he's not a petrol head anymore. He's been driving, he's done a test drive in a couple of electric cars, because there's a load of them, from a Skoda through to a Tesla through to a BYD, and he went, they outperform my S3, and I can see now why people are driving them. Better performance, quieter, and meets all of my criteria of my S3, and now I have no risk in 4 years' time that somebody won't want to buy it. So it's got nothing. I know all the facts that you were saying, Kevin, are absolutely true. But for the average person, they don't know what a kilowatt hour is. They have no idea. They don't know what the range of their petrol cars are. They don't know how many miles they do most of the time per week, or in a lot of cases care too much about the fluctuations of a gallon of petrol. But they do care whether they've got a dead asset in 4 years' time. They do care what it drives like, what it feels like.
Izzy?
Yeah, I think it's the three C's. I think it's cost, convenience, consistency, what I come across. And I think it also varies a bit by age. So for some of the older people I know in my life who are not used to electric cars, there is a bit more of the convenience aspect. For the younger people, I do think it's cost, and especially if you have to rely on public charging. I'm one of the 10% in the report who owns an EV without a driveway, and I love it, and I'd never go back. But it is more expensive for me to charge with an EV than it would be at the moment to have a petrol car. And that is, that's a conscious lifestyle choice you make. And it's not a regret, but there is an issue there.
It comes out a lot in this report that Charge has produced is the inequity. If you have on-street charging, there is this premium, because it's VAT, isn't it, that causes the major problem?
No. So the major problem, so VAT is not aligned, so 7% at home, 20% if you're charging outside. The main problem where people believe that EVs cost more to fuel up than petrol is most of those people are charging at more expensive ultra or fast charging areas, which makes sense. There's a huge amount of money to put one of those things in, huge amount of money to keep them going and maintain them. Therefore, that translates to a higher tariff. But if you bring it as you bring those charging points closer to the home, the ideal one would be in home, but closer to the home, the tariffs start coming down. And so there's a chart that lecky.net have, which compares not kilowatts per hour, but pence per mile. And so they give you a pence per mile for all of the electric chargers you can use, and then they compare that against diesel and petrol. And nobody should be really switching unless they are passionate about EVs. I'm talking about the majority of people, unless it's economically makes sense. So we need to make sure that the average comes down below petrol and diesel. And it's not at the moment, it's beyond that. But you'll find that people who are offering on-street charging are actually starting to get below those petrol and diesel. We've been there for the last 3 years, cheaper than petrol, cheaper than diesel. And that makes it an easy argument. So the myth is EV charging is more expensive. Yes, it is if you use premium sites.
You're from ZapMap.
Yep.
So we can't waste the fact you're from ZapMap. Before we get into the question I want to ask you specifically about ZapMap data is, for you, for myths, we are all, I think, EV drivers would be fair.
Yeah.
You talk to people who aren't EV drivers all the time.
Yep.
What's the myth that you're coming across most? And actually, I'll add to that in a second, but from the members of the public, what they are saying is they think, but is not true.
Yeah, I think it's almost the opposite of what Yann's saying, is that we know that cost and actually environmental reasons are the two key reasons that people shift to EV. And I actually have a lot of people coming up to me and saying, but I've got an old car, it's an old diesel car, I've had it for years, it's actually fine, I'm going to run it into the ground, it's better for the environment, we don't need to build a new car, etc., etc. And anyway, I would, yes.
Because
yes.
I've done that.
Yes.
I had a second-hand car,
Yeah.
and I wanted to get an EV,
Yeah.
but I made the decision, because I did a bit of research, just brief research. It seemed more, because we were going to get a new car,
Yeah.
a new car.
Yeah.
I thought I should run my ICE into the ground, and then when it was completely done, I would then get my EV. Did I make the right decision by doing that?
Yeah, I guess there's a balance, isn't there? Obviously, if you've just bought a diesel car and then you switch, it's not a very environmental thing to do. But I think what people are missing is that although the embodied carbon making the car is absolutely higher in an EV, because in the battery production, as soon as you start driving it, after 20,000 miles, you are absolutely, no question, whatever the energy is, you are making an environmental impact. And I think the sort of the next question when people say but all the electricity comes from, where does the electricity come from? And you go, the UK has got over 60% renewables. That is only going one way. So even if it wasn't renewable, the argument is that the ICE cars, petrol and diesel cars, just are sheerly not inefficient. They are incredibly inefficient, 30% less efficient just changing petrol and diesel to forward motion. So that, that's that. And then once you get all the environmental benefits, it just accelerates. And I think, when people do go, oh, okay, yeah, no, that does make sense to me. So.
Okay, and that segues into my next question. So we're going to talk about, ZapMap, you show where and how people charge.
Yep.
You've got this data, you've got this incredible data of where the charging is taking place in the UK, and that's kind of like a source we can go to find the information out. How powerful is that visibility or seeing a charger on your street or in your app in overcoming some of this middleware resistance? This kind of this converged loop?
I mean, I think really powerful because I think there's sort of different segments, so not all EV drivers are the same. But I think for the ones that sort of the classic current EV drivers, so the 90% who currently charge at home, and people have a driveway. I think the message has got through that if you have a driveway, that EVs are easily cost efficient. But then they go, but what about when I'm going on my long journey? And that's when I go, open up ZapMap, you can see there are thousands of chargers. Yeah, and if you just see the growth in the last 12 months, there's been 30% more chargers, about 60% more rapid or ultra rapid, so 150 kilowatts plus, and the number of hubs, so those lovely places where you see banks of chargers, that's more than doubled. So I think all of that visibility really helps that cohort. And then I think there's the other cohort of the people who don't have a driveway. So then their challenge is, but what am I going to do? So I think that's a little bit more nuanced. They still need the long distance, but they also need some kind of near home charging.
We've experienced a similar kind of effect locally. So visibility is a really big indicator for triggering adoption. So 2 or 3 years ago, we'd put just a single charge point in a street, and we'd see within 12 months, and no, you can't round cars up and down, but about 1.2 EVs per charge point. That has now sped up dramatically. It's now double that, so it's 2.4 charge EVs emerging within 12 months, once just a single charge point is there. So the visibility that charging is coming home is, it's a bit of a football analogy, is really important. All of the theoretical talks about it's cheaper, it's nicer, it's faster. If they haven't been in an EV car and they can't see charging near them, then it's tomorrow, it's not today.
So on that, because you don't have a driveway.
Yes.
Do you have a driveway?
Yes.
You have a driveway? You have a driveway? So, you're our guinea pig. What made you choose to go down the route of an EV when you knew it would theoretically be harder because you don't have a driveway?
Mainly because of salary sacrifice.
Okay.
So we get the EV through my partner's salary sacrifice scheme, and we were paying a similar amount for the actual car per month as we were for a previous ICE vehicle, which is nowhere near as good a model. The car is so fantastic. It's 100 times better than our previous car. And the whole model means that everything's rolled together. So we pay for insurance as part of the monthly cost, which is also great. And for us, that and the climate impact and climate and environment impact were greater than the concerns about cost.
Kevin, you talk EVs. What made you switch?
It's quite an interesting question, actually, because it has been 5 or 6 years since. So I would say definitely I think it was the cost element. I think I've always been fascinated about electrification in general. I think going back to actually what you said about renewables and things like that. Just as a fact, there is no coal anymore on any of our UK grid network. There is zero coal. So anyone talking about that, for starters, just needs to stop saying that, basically. The only fossil fuels that we have. Just stop saying that.
No more coal.
Because it's just completely untrue. But anyway, I think it was more of the cost element, I think. When I realised, for example, at the time, it has gone up a little bit, obviously, and you can look at sort of my day-to-day sort of 10,000 mile updates for that and things like that. But generally speaking, I think when I realised that I could drive my ZSEV for probably about 2 or 3 pence a mile, I realised, well, my old petrol car was running about 14 pence per mile, and that's what I average. So I realised every mile I drive, I save 11p. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but now since I am a naturalised Yorkshireman, money's important. But I think the other thing as well was just the refinement, I think. As you say, you need to get bums on seats. I think that is the way to put it. If you step in an electric vehicle, my first experience was a Nissan Leaf, I think, and it was at the time when they were doing ludicrous, lease deals. And I just remember stepping in one, driving it, and then realising, hang on, where's the vibration? Where's the engine noise? Why do I not have to change gear anymore? In town, for example, you're constantly stop-start. why do I not have to do that anymore? Oh, okay, because it's got a single reacting drive. So I think that was really the main reason why I switched.
I was a petrol head. I had a 3.2 litre car. I had a 5 litre Chimera. You know, I loved my little sports cars. My Skoda Enyaq 3 Promo, best car I've ever driven. Literally, it is the best car I have, and I love speed, but the experience is just out of this world. Izzy, you work in PR, so this question has to come to you. From a communications standpoint, how do we strike the right balance between focusing on the persuadable majority, the 63%, and not wasting energy on the entrenched minority who risk never being convinced?
It's a great question, and I think we need to go back to what the data tells us, which is that most people that outright reject an EV, it's because they say they don't know where they charge. So there is a big infrastructure piece that we're almost waiting for before we can even maybe begin convincing those hardened rejectors. And the movable middle, we know that the answer is a bit different. It's about confidence. This is what this report tells us, that the demand is there, but people want to be convinced. So now it's about, giving the right education, giving real lived experience of why it's great to own an EV. And I think if we can do that, and if we can get real visibility around that, then half of those 63% might come on board.
I think if I looked at those two groups, and so I agree with some of what you're saying about education. Education's happened and it's been happening for a while. I think it's manifesting in the real world. If people see it happening, we talked about people getting into cars, if people see charge points, then it stops from being a news headline to something local, something personal. And I think that's when we'll start to see even those detractors go, oh, it's here now. It's not somewhere in the future. It's not something I can imagine next year or in 2 years' time or in 2030 when there's no more petrol cars. It's now.
Yeah, no, I agree on that visibility piece. And I think one really good policy that the government had, which was so simple and very cost effective, was the little green stripe on the EV. So now I think everyone goes out and they go, wow, more. Yeah, look at all these EVs. And most recently, a new policy has come out, which is about signage for charging on major routes. Brilliant. It's a minor thing, but again, I think all of that, it's not about people finding charge points because they've got other ways to do that, but it's about people who don't have an EV and they go, oh, what's that? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Oh, maybe I'm on my route, that could help me out. So I think those types of things really help.
So you've all done a really good job of actually dodging one of the parts of my question, which I get is, does that mean we ignore the minority?
So my opinion is, you know what, there's 30 million cars plus million cars in the UK, 1.5 million are currently electric. By 2030, if we meet that 80% target or mandate, that will be around 6 million cars out there. You know what, those next 4.5 million people are the critical ones we need to focus on.
You do this for a living, talking to people. Are you talking to the converted, or are you trying to persuade the persuadable? And are you ignoring the unconvertible?
So, am I ignoring the unconvertible, I think, to start off with? Well, I just want to say thank you for the unconvertible, because it makes my comment section go up, and most importantly, it boosts engagement. But I think the thing is that actually having the opportunity to speak to, the people who need just a little bit of convincing is important. I mean, as you say, having just pure visibility is so important. And going back to, again, how do we show that? Well, sometimes it is actually, have a 24-hour test drive, have a 48-hour test drive, because the instant you get in one, you realise how good it can be. But you need to put that through your day-to-day life. So, for example, the best place to do it probably is when your car's in for a service. If a dealer, for example, offered you an EV, or if I'm honest, didn't offer you, just said, okay, here's the keys to an electric car. Well, the fact is, are you going to do in 24 hours, a 400-mile journey? Possibly not. What you're going to do is you're going to go to the shops. You're going to go pick up the kids from school. You're going to go to do all of these sort of things. You're going to do what you do on a regular basis. And then you'll get back and you'll realise, oh, hang on. So how many miles have I actually travelled? How much time have I spent in the car? How many hours have I travelled in this? And then you go, right, okay, so then they'll realise, well, where's the charging? Okay, there's, for example, some of them have a driveway, okay, fair enough, but then some of them realise I can go to the shops and there's a charger. Go to the leisure centre, there's a charger. I go to the motorway services, I don't know it is a rental, so some people might take it a bit further, absolutely. There's chargers here. My next door neighbour's got a shared charger. There's a lamppost charger nearby my house. The thing is that once that visibility starts to come about, there is the infrastructure around, and there is the cost element, but then at least the biggest thing was I found 71% of non-owners fighting range anxiety and 60% think charging availability. Well, actually, if you've got all these chargers around and you've shown it,
map shows.
absolutely, as that map shows, which I absolutely, I say that is my preferred mapping software. I promise I'm not being paid by ZapMap or anything. I do actually recommend them. I think at that point they've already convinced themselves. There's no need necessarily to preach.
Brilliant. Now, to think to another key constituency, this is Yann, you talk to councils and communities. That's how Charge is rolling out its infrastructure at the moment. Do you find that, without breaching any confidences or offending anyone, do you find the same percentage of people who go, I'm convinced, I'm in the middle, I am a rejecter? Are you finding a similar reaction talking to local communities and local councils?
Again, really good question about how communities are reacting to the presence of charging. So Melanie's talked about the growth of charge points in the UK, and it's doubled from last year roughly. The government has just invested £400 million in working with private companies who are going to probably invest 3 times that. And that build out is kind of starting happening now for the next 2 or 3 years. So we're going to go from 50,000 charge points to potentially half a billion, 500,000 charge points, across the country. So it becomes very visible. So when in our larger networks, we've seen this transition that we've talked about to begin with, which is people taking the plunge like you have. And I do it, you do it because you believe in saving the planet. You believe in the newest technology. But now we're seeing, especially in places like Southwark, where we've got a large network, that was the initial rush into a network. But actually the biggest surge in people moving to EV is people who depend on their transport. People who have done the maths and, like you've done, realised that every mile that they drive, they're spending half the money. So it becomes an economic argument. The cars break down less because there's less moving parts, so they become more dependable. So if you can cure the where do I fuel up, you appeal to the economic argument, which is at the heart of what the working man is trying to address.
I mentioned the nice sporty cars I used to drive, and tyres cost you a fortune. I was surprised from a friend of mine who took their car in for a service, their EV, the tyre wear was nothing.
Yeah.
The tyre life just went, and I know I was speaking to a company that's actually trying to work out how you take tyre particulates off the road, because that's a huge part of air pollution. So actually fixing the fact that tyres degrade, which comes from EVs.
Brakes.
Well,
Just a simple thing like brake wear. So technology which is regenerative charging, the engine brakes for you, means that a lot of EV drivers have perfected this 1 foot driving now. So you're not changing brakes anymore. So it's little things that build up, that if you have an ICE car, all of these additional costs, forget the cost of a car, but these surprising costs that you then have to address on a monthly basis or when your car goes in for a service, start to build up. So I think when we talk about the people who are resistant, which is what your original question was, Simon, we've got the easy marketplace. They get it. They've done their research. They're doing it for economic reasons. They're doing it for technology reasons. They're doing it for environmental reasons. I think as we move to the majority and we see all these charge points going out, people who are looking at cost of living choices will start to come on board. And then you've got the majority of people who are driving EVs. The green ticks are everywhere, aren't they? Now, do you want to purposely be in the minority, or do you start opening your mind up that there may be another route? You'll always end up with some people who will always want to be a petrol head. But when everybody around you is driving it, you then probably going to consider a different argument?
Have they driven an EV supercar? Because they're quite spectacular. I mean, so we talk about environmental reasons, we talk about range anxiety. Cost is coming out of one of the most significant factors in whether people use on-street charging. Do you think parity is genuinely achievable, which you've indicated is getting there or is even there, and essential for adoption to spread beyond people with drives? Melanie?
I mean, I think the thing is that there's already quite 10% or so of EV drivers are perfectly okay not to drive an electric car, that even though they don't have a driveway, and they're using a whole range of different charging options. So they're using, a lot of people charge at work, so that's workplace charging is growing. A A lot of people use on-street charging, and as Yann was saying, that the provision of that over the next 2 years, that is going to expand dramatically as all of these every single council in the UK has got some money to roll out chargers. So that is going to really dramatically increase. And then there are other solutions like through pavement charging, which allows people to who don't have driveways to put a cable through their pavement, and then you have a home charger on the side of their house. And then possibly there is also a bit of sharing, local charging hubs, charging at supermarkets. So there's so many different options which are emerging. And I think in terms of the cost parity, I think convenience and cost of home charging can't be denied that that's great. And the other benefit is it also shifts into broader decarbonisation of the home. So linking into your panels, your batteries, your air source heat pumps. So there are a lot of advantages. But I think going forward, there will be ways that on-street charging will find a way to be similar cost, but also linking into those benefits as well in terms of linking into the grid, working out how they can balance the electricity. So at the moment, it isn't yet parity, but I'm hopeful that there will be cost advantages. Because of course, don't forget that when you get a home charger, you are actually paying for there is an upfront investment as well. So that is a benefit of public charging.
Right, I'm going to come to you this question, Yann. Is in the report, 88% of EV owners are dissatisfied with public charging. Do you see there's a technology gap, a cost gap, a planning gap, or something else?
Dissatisfaction with EV charging, I think, is symptomatic of an industry that's basically just starting to form. So, in fact, you'll have the figures for this, but there are over 100 CPOs, charge point operators. Some of them are managing 5 or 6 charge points. Some of them are managing, like us and some of our colleagues at the larger end, thousands of charge points. And that differentiation between people who are operating at scale like a services industry, so we operate at 99% availability, an NPS score of 73, so a high focus on customer experience is always going to be balanced by the fact that there are people who are new to the industry that their core business perhaps isn't taking care of charge points. And I think, as with every new industry, as it grows and it matures, and you find that there are people who look at this as being their core business, that focus on customer experience, in fact, we have an entire team that just works through driver experience and customer experience, starts to drive the interaction with the end drivers. So, yeah, it's probably been a bit bumpy in the early days, which definitely resonates with the 88%. But if you go and look at some of the larger networks and talk about their interactions with drivers, you'll find that the approval rating is much higher. So give it two or three more years when we see these 500,000 charge points deployed and a number of bigger players, that will become the focus of everybody's charging experience.
So I saw a post on this on LinkedIn the other day from someone who had a similar experience, and literally I'd had the same experience the day before. I went to a supermarket, there was a charging post there. I went to charge it. This wasn't plug and play. This was scan the QR code. Okay, fine, I can do that. Now register. Now confirm the email. Now, because you've got a mobile phone, I'm going to send you a security code to approve that. Oh, now you need to download this. It's like, you know what? I can't be bothered. Why is it not simpler?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is that people talk about charging as one type of experience. You know, and the reality, it's just not like fuel that you go to a petrol station and fill up. There are 4 distinct types. En route charging with high powered ultra rapid charging. You've got your on street charging to support you if you don't have off street parking. You've obviously got home charging, and then you've got this sort of destination charging broadly in the middle. And all of those 4 different types are very different experiences and different things that need to got right. I think something that I would say is that on ZapMap, we track over 3 million sessions, successful charging sessions every single month. So it's not that charging isn't working. There is a lot of really, really good charging. And I think it's interesting to hear your experience there. The government regulations say that every single charger that is 50 kilowatts or more has to have contactless payment. So you have to be able to go and pay. So you should not have to download apps and worry about it. And then going forward, everything above 8 kilowatts also needs contactless payment. And then I think as a sort of a sub point on payment, because payment is something that people are concerned about, is that there are operators, ZapMap is an example, who not only aggregate the charges, but also allow you to have a single point of payment. So people get used to a user experience, and then they can pay through an app or through a card across, we've got over 40 networks that you can now pay through ZapMap. So I think some of that is education. So
Yeah, but I've dropped a bit of a there with kind of my experience, but why there has to be a reason?
The reason comes back down to it's an experimental industry, or it has been, and the focus has been on technology, not the consumer. Most of the time when you go to, say, conferences, it's all about the newest technology that's come out and not about the driver experience. So we like probably a lot of other people in the industry who are responding to these very large network opportunities, that's front and center. We have a UX UI team who are looking at how to minimize the clicks, the interactions to get a charge, to the point where you wouldn't need to do any at all. I think Tesla did a really good job of this. They've got a closed network for Teslas, now it's slightly open, where you just plug in, identifies your car and starts a charge. There is the potential to do that with EV charging throughout. It just needs a bit of synchronization between car manufacturers and EV operators.
And car parks do it. They can recognise the car. When you pay by phone, people like that, it recognises who the car is.
Yeah.
So I think we're standardising the technology a little bit. I think that will mature. I think that'll open up some other avenues. I think things like roaming partners will play a part in that. I think the operators themselves are starting to work with each other more often. And at the heart of it is we want to make sure that it's a seamless driving experience, because you can guarantee you have a bad one, you're never going back to that supermarket again, are you, to charge?
No, and
You're not going to try a second time.
no, and in reality, I'm slightly being grumpy old man in terms of that response, because actually I think what they were trying to do was protect my bank account. I mean, in reality, literally my impatience was actually the reason why the security was happening is I had never been to this charging point. I was using it. They needed to make sure that the money was coming out was actually something I wanted to happen. So I get it. What was flawed there was the messaging about it. It was a mechanical process rather than going, we are doing this to protect your bank account from fraud. If they'd just said that, that would have instantly lowered my blood pressure and I wouldn't have been such a grumpy old man.
Same experience. I've been out at night, it's been raining, I've been beside a charge point operator I've never used before, and I've been through those 19 steps to try and get a charge. And I've gone, oh, sorry, I'll wait until I drive away and find a fast charger with contactless. So yeah, it's a variable experience, which I genuinely believe in 2-3 years' time, that the smaller networks will probably be shaken out or be consolidated, and the larger network operators will focus on that consumer experience as a priority.
Brilliant. Question for you, Kevin, and then we'll probably take a break, is the report shows that 24% of drivers are ready to switch in the next 12 months, which I think surprised quite a few of us when we got the research back, including the guys at YouGov. What's the most effective way to engage those buyers in real time before they make a decision and they're going to drift back to being an ICE driver, petrol or diesel?
So going back to, so 24% of drivers are ready to make the switch, essentially. I think the first thing is there needs to be the facts, there needs to be the information out there. I think the big problem at the moment is that the first thing that I see, and I still see, given the fact that I am in sometimes a little bit of an echo chamber, is I still see a lot of misinformation. I mean, there was a piece out from, I think, Carbon Brief that said that the Times wrote an article that said EV sales were down 10.8%. Had to redact it and said, actually, they were up by 62%. Now, that's not a plus or a minus, that is an error, right? Yet the redaction probably was in size -1 font. I can barely read it, let alone anyone else. No one's ever going to care. So there is a big drive of misinformation at the moment. Stuff about range anxiety, stuff about battery safety, stuff about battery longevity. So that needs to be tackled first. There needs to be cold, hard facts. And I think actually, currently, at the moment, I think there are a lot of people talking the real truths about electric vehicles. Sometimes it can be slightly inconvenient. If you've got off-street parking, for example, if you haven't got off-street parking, for example, it can be a little bit less convenient. If, for example, you take the mindset of you have to go to an ultra-rapid charger and spend 20 or 30 minutes, that is going to be more inconvenient. I think saying a 5-minute fill-up is a bit of a push, I must admit, because it's not really a 5-minute fill-up, as we've talked about previously, but I think there needs to be those cold hard truths on that one. But I think the key bit to switch those 24% of people is visibility, as you mentioned, but also getting them onto the seat of an electric car and just giving it to them for 48 hours, 24 hours.
It's a bit more than that as well. I think I'm going to go back to the man in the street and his focus on cash. The challenge we've all got about how tough it is just to make the right decisions in our day-to-day. So the entry point into EVs was the Teslas, wasn't it? That was the only way you could get an EV 5 years ago. Now we've got 30 different cars that now qualify for, it might be less than that, but it's around 20 to 30 cars that qualify for the government's new incentive plan, which is cars under 37. And now you've got a whole car industry that from the Far East is coming over, dramatically reducing first buy prices, which will knock on to second-hand prices. And that will become the entry level for the switch.
And I think that's interesting because of the demographic of this group. So they're typically younger, very urban, and that probably means they're either going to buy a used EV or they're going to look to get it through salary sacrifice. God, that was a tongue twister. And I think that's really key to remember. Like, what is their entry point, and how does that track to demographics, and how does that track to the things that we need to overcome? Because convenience can be an issue, but I think there can be a constructive conversation around convenience.
Brilliant. Melanie, final point to you on that point is 24% of drivers are ready to switch in the next 12 months. That's massive. 30 million cars, 24%. I know they won't all be changing cars in the next year, but that is a quarter of all drivers saying, yep, I'd switch.
Yeah.
How do we grab that moment?
Yeah.
And are we doing enough to grab that moment, do you think, as a EV industry?
I mean, first of all, that's great news, isn't it? Because I think what we've seen over the last couple of years has been a lot of uncertainty with the government flip-flopping on all their policies, and now we have certainty. We know that the 2030 ban is in place. We've got the ZEV mandate in place. The government has got demand-side support for these cars under 37,000, which I'm really pleased about, because I think focusing on the lower cost cars is really where it's at. And also, really importantly, a year ago, there just wasn't the volume of second-hand cars on the market. But now, if you sort of imagine 3 years ago, there were 300,000 brand new cars sold. So those are now beginning to come onto the market. So that's really the game changer. As you've mentioned in the report, 80% of all cars are bought second-hand. This is when we're really starting to motor. And also that's where the younger people are buying their cars. Not many people, 20% of people buy a new car, and a lot of that's via a company. But once we get this second-hand car market going, fabulous.
So, Melanie, incentives like subsidies and grants clearly shift the movable middle, but rejectors remain unmoved. Should government policy stop trying to convince the never will group altogether and just focus on this convincible group?
Yeah, that's an interesting question in terms of what is the role of government incentives. I mean, I think, first of all, to me, it's fantastic news that there's this big section of people who are really ready to move to EVs, and in my opinion the focus should be on them, because they are ready to go. And in terms of the government incentives, there's both the supply side and the demand side. So on the supply side, we've got the ZEV mandate, which mandates, for those of you who don't know, that's mandating car manufacturers to sell 80% of all their cars by 2030 to be pure EV, which is it's quite a groundbreaking bit of policy. In reality, it's not actually going to reach 80% because there's a few flexibilities, but the direction of travel is really clear. Secondly, on the demand side, there is the 2030 ban, which a lot of people have heard about, and that's about no more sales of cars which are powered solely, and solely is an important word, by petrol or diesel by 2030, and then by 2035, just pure electric cars. And I think what that's important, because it really gives people a firm understanding that is what is happening. When that switched from 2030 to 2035 a few years ago, that made people, is this happening? Is it not? Now it's clear it is happening. And then, of course, there's all around the infrastructure. So there's been an awful lot of support from the government over the years on infrastructure. Some of it's been a bit piecemeal, but now we do have a decent charging infrastructure, and there's a big policy, the LEVI Fund, Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, which Yann mentioned before, and this is a fund which is provided to every single local authority across the UK. It is empowered by private investment as well, and that will be putting on-street chargers. Really, the main aim is for those people who don't have driveways, let's incentivise them, or let's give them the visibility so they can also make the switch.
That's a perfect segue then, because I mean, for Yann, with 80% of UK car sales being used cars, what role should infrastructure providers play in growing confidence in this critical second-hand market?
So confidence, growing confidence, the other side of that is removing anxieties. So I think we've now gone through a number of different anxieties. There was anxiety about whether it was going to be EVs or whether it was going to be hydrogen. I think we were talking about that off screen a minute ago. There was an anxiety about, well, how long do the batteries last? Because 80 miles isn't going to get me very far. Tick that box off. So tick, tick, tick. Is this something that's really going to happen? Policy. Tick that box off, we've just heard. So now we're getting into the economic arguments. So can I afford an EV? Because I can't afford a £100,000 Tesla car. And we're now seeing those new cars that have been bought by fleets coming to the second-hand market and becoming much, much more affordable. And then the final one is, okay, cost of charging. That's starting to come down, but it's not quite where it is in the driveway. But getting charging points near people's homes will remove that last bit, which is charging anxiety. Is there somewhere I can charge near me? Mm-hmm. And that evidence that the infrastructure may not be in every street, but in most streets, will suddenly tick that last box. And then we're at the very last one, which will be, how can we then start reducing the cost of the tariffs? So having the government behind us in the industry being the catalyst to make private companies enthusiastic and confident to invest. So for every pound, we're talking about £3 being brought in from the private sector to build this network out. I think that confidence over a 10, 15 year period, which is what these concessions or contracts are, will see infrastructure spring up all over the place. If it's there in your face, visibly available, and it's reasonable, addressing the charging cost, I think we then break into that majority of people saying, if it's here and it's cheaper and it's faster and it's all of these things, there are very few reasons left on the list to say no.
So curveball question for all of you then. This isn't my final question. The thing this curveball is, based on current polling, we can cut this bit out if you don't want to do it. Based on current polling, a certain political party may well become the next government, which has a commitment against net zero, and its policy is not for supporting this. If government support overnight was stripped away for all the changes we're talking about, would the EV market still continue?
So the question is, if a different party got into play with different policies to the current government, would that make the EV market go away? I mean, from my perspective, absolutely not. I mean, first off, this is not just a UK endeavour. This is a whole transition, an energy transition. It's not just about the cars. So the cars, the electric cars are better. They're much more technical. They are the future. They're running on renewable energy, and that is not going to stop whatever government comes in. I think we're too far over the tipping point. And I think the second point is that a new government coming in, they would be crazy to take away the focus on the electric car market, because it is fantastic for UK PLC, new tech, new jobs, lots of jobs for technicians to install electric vehicle charging. This is going to help. It's a positive economic story for the UK.
But there is the challenge, or there's many structural challenges which we've discussed today, but one we haven't touched on, and we won't go into detail about because it's very technical, but is the price of electricity. And I think that's a challenge for the whole transition in general, and something that doesn't need to be tackled head on with government policy to avoid backlashes like we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think two P's for me. I think people are influenced by politics, but they make decisions based on pounds. And when it's cheaper to buy an EV car and it's cheaper to run an EV car, then I don't think it'll matter which badge people wear on their lapel. It's how much money they're left in their pocket.
There's a fairly major national quality broadsheet that is very anti-EV. And a lot of its commentary and editorial is anti-EV, but I found out that basically its readers are twice as likely to have an EV than the population as a whole. So there is kind of like this underground movement. Given the report's findings and everything you've said, it feels like the board is lighting up green. Everything's going fine. So, are we on track to getting where we want to get to? And what single intervention would make the most significant difference in this next 5 years?
Single, I think I just made this point, but I'll make it again. I do think getting the price of electricity down, which can allow tariffs to come down, which makes home charging, which is already getting price parity, complete price parity, and means that public charging also becomes at price parity as well.
Any other single interventions that people like to go out? I've got another question to ask, but any single intervention that you think we could take to actually make this happen in the next 5 years?
I mean, what I would like to see is absolutely no more softening of the ZEV mandate and making sure those car manufacturers' feet are very much held to the fire to keep on focusing on producing cars that are good value and at a price point that people want to pay.
I think that the last one, I think you started with this, which is about that customer experience. People will, once they've had a bad experience, will never revisit that experience. You have a bad experience in a restaurant, you're unlikely to go back there even if it has new management. If you have a great experience and you consistently have a great experience, not only will you continue to use it, you'll tell other people. So I think the greatest thing that we on the EV charging side can do is focus on that driver experience and continue to improve it.
So, final question, it's the same question for all of you. Hopefully hundreds of people are watching this, thousands of people are watching this, millions of people are watching this. If you could give one message to the UK public to turn curiosity into confidence, knowing that many will respond to education and the few never will, what would it be?
How do we do this? Well, how do you get the curious to actually drive an electric vehicle well? The only way to work out whether it works is, and I am a scientist, is by experimentation. And if that's the case, you're looking for a new vehicle, or you're looking for a used vehicle, try that electric vehicle. Does that mean that some dealers might need to try something a bit different compared to it? Does a 45-minute test drive work in that case? Possibly not. There needs to be a different approach to that. But absolutely, you need to step in one, you need to give it a go.
Brilliant. Melanie, one message.
Yeah, I think my one message to those people who are considering getting an electric car but are a little bit hesitant, I think we've already heard today that charging is a big challenge for many people, or the perception of it. So what I would say is, look, don't be worried about the charging. There is tens of thousands of chargers out there, whether you're going on a longer journey, whether you're going to your local gym or your restaurant, and more infrastructure is coming on street. So don't be worried. Open up Zap Map in your area, have a look, and I think you'd be surprised.
Brilliant. Izzy, one message.
I'd say if you're curious, then be curious, indulge that curiosity. Go and have a test drive, go and look around your local area, scope out the chargers, go and do your research. Just be open, and if it's the right thing for you, then go for it. If it's not right now, that's okay too. We'll get there.
Excellent. And Yann, you're our person from char.gy for a char.gy video, for a char.gy report. What is the one message that you want to give to the UK public?
Really simply, we're coming to a home near you.
So thank you, everyone. That was a really good decision. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. I actually learned quite a few things there too as well. So thank you. Thank you so much.